Greetings. We continue today part 2 of our study on Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, and Christmas. We want to look at the second element of change in Judaism, which concerns literature. The apocryphal books come out of this period. We, as many do, reject them for a lack of inspiration, as God plainly stated that he would not speak for a period of time. Historically, we now know that that was some 400 years. The Talmud also developed during this same time period, and we would suspect it for the same reason. See, the Talmud is the writing down of the oral opinions of the rabbis from the 5th, 4th, 2nd, 3rd BC, those 4 centuries. Some allege that the Talmud dates back to Moses at Mount Sinai and elevate the Talmud to a position of either equality or even superiority to the scriptures. The Talmud was probably in view when Jesus spoke of the religious leaders of his day in Matthew 15:9, when he said, "But in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men." They weren't teaching the word of God. They were teaching these opinions of their rabbis. The Catholic Church has a similar doctrine in which they allege that the Pope can speak ex cathedra, and whatever he says is given equal or greater weight than that of the written word of God. But let me hasten to say that many Baptists have and are developing customs and traditions which are not necessarily doctrines of God, but are also based on the commandments of men. The third element of change in Judaism concerned sects. That's S-E-C-T-S. The acceptance or rejection of the Talmud in whole or in part had led to divisions within Judaism. This word sect, S-E-C-T, literally means a heresy group. The Pharisees, which means separated ones, were highly legalistic work salvationists. It's noted that they were probably a vestige of the religious thrust of the Maccabean rebellion that happened during this time. The Sadducees, that they were calling themselves the righteous ones, were the aristocratic hierarchy who were more interested in politics than religion. And these may have been part of the Hasmonean dynasty of history. And then there was the scribes, which were neither a religious sect nor a political party. Rather, they were a professional group who were the administrators of the law on a daily basis, the lawyers, the scribes, those who copied documents, teachers. These titles could be used synonymously for a great part. And then there was the Sanhedrin, the 70 elders. They're believed to be modeled after the 70 elders who helped Moses, and some conjecture has the New Testament Sanhedrin as a compromise of power with the Hasmonean dynasty. Now, all these things which we have discussed are important to our understanding of Hanukkah, or the Feast of Dedication, which also began during this silent interbiblical period. So now let's look at the origin of Hanukkah itself. Daniel had prophesied concerning 4 kingdoms that would become world powers, each succeeding the other. First, there was the Babylonians, who were succeeded by the Medo-Persians, and then the Medes kind of dropped out and the Persians took over toward the end. And then the Greeks. And upon the death of Alexander the Great, his kingdom was divided into 4 parts, and then after that, the Romans. But we want to focus for a moment on the division of Alexander the Great's kingdom among his 4 generals after his death. In particular, the ruler of the Syrian dynasty, a man named Antiochus Epiphanes. In 169 BC, Antiochus waged war against and defeated the Egyptian dynasty, but was ordered to withdraw by Rome as they were assuming power. So returning from Egypt back to his home in Syria, he stopped off in Palestine to vent his anger upon the hapless Jewish people. Antiochus entered into and destroyed a large portion of the city of Jerusalem. He slaughtered the men, the women, and the children of the city. He invaded the holy temple, desecrating it and robbing it of all its gold furniture, and to show his utter contempt for the Jews and their God, Jehovah, he sacrificed a pig, which was unclean according to Jewish law, to his god Jupiter upon their altar. He further outlawed the practices of Judaism, their worship, their practice of circumcision, their observance of the Sabbath day, and their dietary restrictions, such as the pork prohibition. He dispatched officers to enforce these prohibitions in every city of Palestine. Most people, fearing Antiochus's wrath, were simply obedient to his demands. But Matthias, that is Matthew Maccabee, the father of 5 sons, refused to comply. Apelles, the Syrian officer, came to their town of Modin, which was about 3 miles north of Jerusalem, to enforce the new laws. Matthew Maccabee vowed to kill the first Jew who dared to fulfill the demands of Antiochus, which he did do. Matthew himself is killed, but a revolt begins. This revolt is carried forward by each of his 5 sons, and one by one they are also killed. But the revolution which they began ultimately led to their emancipation from Antiochus and the restoration of Jewish worship in the temple at Jerusalem. On the 25th day of Kislev, our December, in the year 164 BC, the temple was rededicated, and Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication as it's called in John 10:22, was inaugurated. The Feast of Dedication is marked because of a miraculous thing which occurred. When they went to reinstitute the temple worship, they only found 1 cruse of the holy oil for the temple's lampstand, which was only a 1-day supply. Now, there was a great problem because it took 7 days to prepare a new supply according to the instructions of Genesis 29 and 35, receiving a blessing each of those 7 days. But the miracle here is that 1-day supply of oil that they had lasted for 8 days until a new supply was dedicated, and so therefore they have the annual commemorative celebration known as Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication.